What phone are you using right now?
Using an iPhone 16 Pro Max.
And why do you use this phone?
That's the big question. So I've been flicking between Android and iPhone for quite a long time, and ultimately I've settled on this being my main phone, even while I test other phones now, because I love my MacBook. I love it so much. I think it's so efficient. The battery life is crazy, and Final Cut Pro, sort of Apple's editing program, is just well done. And so when you kind of work backwards from that, make using an Android phone does nothing for my day-to-day life that this doesn't. It
Hmm.
just makes my life more difficult, basically.
Hmm.
So I love like there's certain Android phones like Vivo, which is really popular in India. I find their cameras amazing. I
Hmm.
find them exciting. I love taking photos with them. So sometimes I will keep a Vivo with me while I've got the iPhone, but it never really makes sense to not keep this with me
Hmm.
if I'm a Mac user.
So the ecosystem won you over.
Ultimately, yeah. I'm a little bit fed up of having half my photo album in Android phones, half my photo album in iPhones.
Hmm.
It's
Gotcha.
just like they've made it really annoying to jump between ecosystems.
Hmm. Do you see Apple fading away in any degree over the next 10 to 20 years?
No, I think Apple has positioned themselves in a very careful way. They're a premium brand, right? They're a premium desirable brand. And they specifically like never even put themselves on sale, unlike every other phone company. And that protects that brand image that an Apple product is worth what an Apple product is worth.
Hmm.
That works really well in a world of rising incomes, growing middle class. So I think they're only posed to grow.
Have you studied Steve Jobs enough?
I'd say I understand who he was as a character.
If Steve Jobs was alive over the
Hmm.
last decade or so, how would Apple be different?
It's a really tough question because it's hard to see how Apple could have evolved in any different way to how they've evolved now. But they may have done things in different orders. Like Steve Jobs, for example, was very opposed to styluses, whereas the iPads now have an Apple Pencil, and the original complaint of Steve Jobs is like you gotta like put them somewhere and they fall off or something like that. And he said yuck, like he thought it was gross, the idea. And he was right. Like I still think the way that Apple has the Apple Pencil and it kind of magnetically clips on, but then it falls off half the time. That original complaint he had still has not been solved. So I think he had a point, and he might have decided actually, I'm not going to introduce a stylus until we've fixed that problem.
Based on the little that I've read about him and understood about him, considering that we're talking about AR, VR, AI, these kind of things, and considering the fact that he always innovated in terms of hardware, like he brought an iPod, he
Mm.
brought an iPhone, before that, he brought the iMac, all that. I think he'd be cooking up a new physical hardware product that we are not able to think about right now.
There's a chance. I also, though, I wouldn't overestimate how much one guy can do in the sense of like, he was a visionary. He could have great ideas, but Apple is also tied to the technology available in the world to some extent. And, they kind of have this reputation as a company who actually does things second a lot of the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
So while they had this incredible moment with the first iPhone, I'm not sure that Steve Jobs being alive now would put Apple in this position where they're 1,000 leagues ahead of everyone else and their AI is super polished and can do things that no one else can do.
Hmm.
Because in the end, like Apple phones still use Samsung chips, and
Hmm. But even back in the 80s and 90s, they did things second.
um, there was a lot of innovation. Um, it was a different world then. I feel like we're reaching a world where a lot of this tech is more standardized, and companies, they're all improving by 10 to 30% each year, and they're kind of growing in the same direction. iPhones and Androids have actually become more similar over the last 10 years
Gotcha.
because Android looks at Apple and they're like, oh, that's a great feature, I'll take that, and vice versa.